Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to move to suspend the regular order of business in order that we can take up and consider Senate Bill 9. I'd like to lay this out and then take any questions from people. This bill and legislation like it was filed in the last regular session. It has been a contentious debate at times between Democrats and Republicans. But this bill is not about political parties, nor is it about race or about hate or about fear-mongering. I want to emphasize my feelings about this. We're all Americans, and we're all fortunate enough to live not only in the greatest country in the world, but in the greatest state in this country. And one of the things that makes our state great is that it's filled with diverse cultures, a strong economy, and we have vast prospects for growth because of that. And while we want to welcome all of those who come here to work and raise their families and contribute to our state and country, we would not be the great nation or state that we are without the rule of law. And having said that, the federal government has turned a deaf ear to our plea for assistance in securing our southern border, and we as state legislators see the importance of a secure border and have made great strides over the last few sessions in doing what we can to provide additional funding and tools to law enforcement to secure our border with our friends in Mexico. The federal government has also failed to reform immigration and citizenship policies. And as state legislators, there's less that we can do about this on immigration, which is a federal issue. However, we must follow the laws that have been set out for us, and local law enforcement as well as state officers, when sworn into office, make the following oath. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties of this office and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God. The goal of this legislation is to be proactive. Just to our south, drug cartels are waging a war with their own people over trade and smuggling routes. The news stories become more frequent and horrifying by the day, and whether you're talking about human trafficking, drug smuggling, or spillover violence, it's real and it's at our doorstep. And I believe that by taking proactive measures to stand up and fortify the laws and our enforcement of those laws, we send a loud and clear message to criminal, illegal aliens that we will not tolerate their presence in Texas. By creating a uniform, statewide standard for how laws will be interpreted, we propagate safer streets and neighborhoods. Many local law enforcement communities have made the argument that by making the job of law enforcement to question immigration status, it will damage the relationship that officers have with their communities. It's argued that this type of legislation could deter illegal aliens from reporting a crime they've witnessed or even reporting a crime that they're a victim of. However, officers have a duty to their communities, and often there are people within their communities that may be illegal who have come to Texas to work and provide for better lives for their family. This bill does not require an officer to inquire about someone's citizenship status. It also does not provide for any specific action in accordance with a person's citizenship status. Rather, the option of the inquiry would be available to the officer at their discretion when a case or situation warrants such information. El Paso is a perfect example of a time when an immigration inquiry can actually be good for a crime victim. In El Paso, if a crime is committed against an illegal immigrant, the El Paso Police Department may help that victim obtain a U visa to stay in the country legally during the term of the investigation and the trial. Without the ability to inquire into immigration status, the El Paso Police Department would not be able to assist the victim in this way. Maria Aguilar, who came and testified before the Senate Committee on Transportation and Homeland Security, shared her story about being brutally beaten with her husband and how thankful she was that she called the police when they assisted her with obtaining legal residence in the United States and arrested her husband, who's now serving a 15-year sentence. Being able to come forward helped her get the help that she needed, and frankly, it probably saved her life. Some have questioned the effect of this bill and what it would have on district attorneys. However, it's not the responsibility of our local district attorneys to enforce immigration laws through prosecution. A district attorney, however, would be in violation of this bill if they enacted a policy that prohibited their attorneys from inquiring into the immigration status of a person lawfully detained or arrested. Immigration violations are civil crimes. They would not be prosecuted at all under state law, and they should be turned over to federal authorities for enforcement. In determining a person's lawful or unlawful status in the country would have a great bearing on a criminal case. This bill does not authorize or require or provide for the ability of an officer to check the immigration status on the street. In the case of a rogue officer, if the officer is choosing to focus too much on immigration status or running searches to the point that that officer is failing to perform other duties, then he or she should be sanctioned for failing to do their job. This does not violate the rule, order, or ordinance policy provisions in the bill, as that is specific to one situation. In addition, this is not a consistent action of a policy to prohibit because it is case specific. As a parallel example, and with this argument in mind, if for some reason an officer became fixated with traffic violations, if upper management was concerned with the officer's time management when they explained to the officer that his job is more than traffic violations or other duties to be performed, this doesn't mean that upper management's making it a policy to prohibit the enforcement of traffic violations, but just rather there are more tasks that need to be performed in enforcing all the laws, not just some of them. Members, this bill contains three major parts: a policy for prohibiting sanctuary cities in the state, the requirement for the use of secure communities, and the requirement for a lawful presence to obtain a state-issued ID or driver's license. The sanctuary cities portion of this legislation provides that a local government entity may not enact a policy prohibiting the enforcement of state or federal immigration laws, including the Federal Immigration and Nationality Act. If an entity does enact a policy like this, then the Attorney General may file a suit against the entity, and should the AG prevail, the entity would be subject to the loss of state grant funding. This requirement is in line with the very oath of office that I quoted earlier, and every law enforcement officer and state official takes that oath when they're sworn into office. It also brings local policy in line with the Department of Public Safety policy and creates a uniform standard across our state for the enforcement of these laws when it comes to inquiring about immigration status. The Secure Communities program I'd like to comment on for clarity is how immigration status ought to be obtained by a local law enforcement agency. This bill requires every person who's arrested in Texas to be run through the Federal Secure Communities program. This program is already in use in county jails in every county in our state, and this legislation would address a loophole where people who are arrested and never taken to a county jail are not run through this program. An example of this would be the illegal alien who ran over the police officer in Houston a couple of weeks ago, who had been in the Houston City Jail but not bonded out there and was not run through the Secure Communities program at the Harris County Jail. The lawful presence for a driver's license language is related to the rules that the department has currently for a driver's license. In particular, the requirements to prove lawful presence in the United States is required by 47 other states, and there are 2 other states that are working on changing those rules now. These changes will give the department the statutory authority that they need to implement the rules under which they're currently operating. The change will make a driver's license expire with a valid stay in the United States, and further enumerate the authority of the Department of Public Safety to validate lawful presence to obtain a driver's license. Unless the department has information, they will be required to collect proof of U.S. citizenship or legal residence or documentation of lawful presence. If the applicant cannot and will not supply this documentation, the department may not issue the ID. Additionally, with these new security measures around the driver's license, this bill also works to address the concerns about driver's license clerks not knowing what a valid form of temporary visitor identification is. The bill requires that the department designate certain driver's license offices as temporary visitor stations, and these offices must have at least 2 staff members especially trained to identify the 25 types of documentation in the department's temporary visitor issuance guide, and they must also act as a resource for other offices around the state. This expanded program has been completely funded in House Bill 1, the budget bill that we passed during the regular session. The committee substitute that's before us today removes a couple of requirements from the bill. The first would have allowed DPS to create rules regarding commercial driver's licenses in accordance with federal law, and the second would have statutorily required that the temporary visitor ID look substantially similar to the regularly issued state ID. These were taken out primarily to avoid the possibility of a one-subject violation in the bill. Mr. President, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider the committee substitute Senate Bill 9.